photo exhibit going on right now that will be on through October 31st on Barnes businesses and buildings. And so you want to see that. It's up, but we've moved it around, but you can still catch it in the main gallery here. We also have a cemetery tour on September 30th, and we had to put on an extra tour at 2:30 because we'd almost sold out on the tickets. So if you're interested in the cemetery tour, we're going to do that on September 30th. So tickets are here. You can buy one afterwards. They're $5 a piece. Next month we will have Jack and Sue Reinhardt, and they will talk about their lives in Edwardsburg on the 19th of October. So hopefully you'll want to come and see that. Yeah, they're going to talk on the 19th of October. Jack and Sue Reinhardt, yeah. Tonight we have Tom and Marje. I'm going to try and do this off the top of my head because they have an extensive life, and it would be too long to try and read it off of my notes. They met after Marge graduated from Indianapolis General. She was went to nursing school there. She was from Batesville. He was from Evansville. She met him after he graduated. He was working at Indianapolis General for his room and board while he went to medical school at IU Medical School in Indianapolis. So they dated and they got married, and then they lived in a mobile home until he graduated from medical school. And then he went to Logansport. She had been working at Charity Hospital, and he went to the psychiatric division there, I think, for a year. And then Dr. Foley, who was practicing in Edwardsburg, had graduated a year before Tom, and he invited Tom to come practice with him in Edwardsburg. And they had an office there on Gateway Drive, or on M62, where the Dollar General is now. And then in 1963, Tom opened his own office on Gateway Drive. They lived at Eagle Lake. They raised 4 children, reared 4 children there. And in 1981, they bought the Barber House on Section Street and proceeded to remodel it and restore it. And they lived there until 2006, where they entertained everybody in the world and grew hostas and all kinds of things like that. But in the meantime, Marge worked for the Cass County Health Department, and then she decided to go to nurse practitioner school in Milwaukee. And so that's when she got off the Edwardsburg School Board. She had served on the school board, and she left the school board when she went to nurse practitioner school in Milwaukee. Then she worked for the Cass and Berrien County Health Departments. And when Cass merged with Van Buren, she worked exclusively for the Berrien County Health Department, and she's a certified women's health nurse practitioner. Tom served on the Cass County Mental Health Board. He was president of the Cass County Mental Health Foundation. He was president of the Edwardsburg Methodist Church Board until they merged with Adamsville. They were very active in the youth group. They were involved in the Miss Edwardsburg pageant. They, when the Barneswalla Theater was founded, they became involved in that, and he served as president of that for several years. He's written a book on it. I don't know if he's published it yet. Now, I wanted to get that out of the way because they have a lot of stories to tell you.
No, we're finished now.
Yeah. So that's just a sampling of what they've done. So I'm going to turn it over to them, and I'm going to hand them the mic, and Bill has already instructed them to keep it up close to their mouth so that you can hear them.
And if we don't, remind us to put it on.
I was going to be real smart tonight. I'm going to have a little tray here with my notes on it, and everybody wouldn't see the notes, and I just slide them off to the side. But now I've got to hang them in my hand, and you all see when I'm moving the notes around. So anyway, she gave a very good synopsis of everything we're going to tell, and hopefully we'll think of something that she didn't say. Okay, where's the first page? Oh, I wanted to say first that we knew Otis Montgomery very well when we first came here. And it's our opinion that this building here and the organization that runs it and everything would not have been here Why do I need that? Otis had so much to do with getting the building cleaned up and turned into a museum. So he used to go out to the Cassopolis Library and read through tons of, oh, you can't see me. He used to go up to the Cass Library, and I'd go with him frequently, and he poured through the old newspapers and took notes, and then I'd take a camera, those old cameras that we used to have before phones, and we'd go out and he'd have me take pictures of places, and then he'd tell all about them. I thought he was telling all about them until we drove away, and he couldn't stop him. He kept talking and talking about this, and I said, Otis, we've got to record all this because it seems like you've got a lot more to say besides what we got on the camera. And just as I said that, that was the last time we ever went out. I'm not sure exactly why we quit going, but anyway, he was just full of knowledge about Edwardsburg, and he was very much in favor of this museum being built and to prolong the preservation of our history. Okay, now we go to Foley. Foley was a year ahead of me in school, and he graduated a year ahead of me. He went to our internship. He went to South Bend. He got to South Bend and found out that if they wanted him for the Vietnam War, he could be indoctrinated into the service. And so he moved up here because any doctor in Edwardsburg was exempt from the draft. They couldn't take a doctor out of a small community that didn't have enough health care. So he started practicing here, and after about a year, 6 months or a year, he thought, I can't handle all this work. So he invited me up, and Jan Karras showed us a real nice time on Eagle Lake, showed us what life could be like if I didn't like that residency in Logansport. And so after 3 visits, I said, okay. It really stressful for me to make that decision, but I said, okay. The reason I'd gone into a psychiatric residency was because I did not feel qualified to run a business and practice medicine in a business. So I came up here, and he gave me at least a year's tutelage and told me how to run a business, and I was very happy. I learned a lot of things from him. And then at the end of that year and a half, he said, Tom, our business is not growing fast enough, and we got to make a decision. I'll give you the choice. You can stay here, or you can go into South Bend. If you want to stay here, I'll go into South Bend. So I said, I want to stay here. I like this. So Foley went back to South Bend, and he had a very productive practice for many years. He died in his sleep Sunday afternoon some years. His birthday was one day after mine. Of course, he was a couple years older. So anyway, I took over his practice, and it was in the fall of about 60, and he took a bunch of patients back to South Bend with him when he left. So I thought, I may have trouble here. But there's a strep throat epidemic that year. Everybody had it. And they were flocking into the office, and I was doing throat swabs on them. And I'd have the diagnosis by the next morning. It was very complicated. But anyway, I did that, and it worked out fine. After that, a lot of these people, I guess, came in with their throats, came in for other things too. So we did okay. Now I'm sliding so you can't see what I'm doing.
Not hiding it well.
That has crosses through it. I think that means Marge didn't like the way I wrote it. So when I got the practice for myself, we were in the Ham building, which was over where the Dollar General is right now. And it was fine, but it was not a doctor's office. So I thought, I'm gonna build an office. So about that time, Chuck Madden came to me and said, I want to build an office too, and there's some property on Gateway Drive for sale, and maybe we could go together and get that. We decided to build 2 separate offices, and I took the one off the main road, which wasn't good business-wise, but it was a prettier place. And for many years, we had a garden out behind, and I furnished Gene with 150 cantaloupes one day when he was having trouble feeding the crowd at the party. So anyway, I didn't know who should build the office. I always thought if I didn't become a doctor, I would be a architecture person. I would design things. So I designed my office. I figured out how many steps it would be to do a certain procedure and everything. I had an X-ray room. The walls were lined with lead, and it's still an H&R Block office out on the highway. And you'll notice in that building that all the windows are up high. That's how they do it in doctor's offices, so you can't see in. And anyway, I asked Otis who could build this office, and he said, who did he say?
No, Pontius.
Mr. Pontius had just built a house for Otis, and so I talked to, I'm trying to think of his first name. Anyway, I talked to him, and he said he'd do it. Floyd Pontius, yeah. And he built the entire office off of my drawings, and I never was unhappy about it because he did a great job. And the 2 years or year and a half that I've been with Foley, I had learned a lot. So the transfer to the new building and everything wasn't that difficult for me. When I first went to Indianapolis for my training, I worked in the laboratory at night to earn my bed and board, and that was a hospital at Marje. So I knew a lot about lab procedures, and I would take stains of blood and urine and check them out under the microscope. I still have a lot of the dyes that you use to stain cells. But I still got the microscope, and I still have something else that I'm talking about. Anyway, when we first came here, we joined the Edwardsburg Methodist Church on Church Street. And now it's time for me to give my microphone to my wife.
Really happy for breaking in and telling him how it really happened. We moved to Edwardsburg in the fall of 1959 into a little house on Covert Lake. And Al Karras was kind of took over our housing all the times we lived here. Why don't you move that time? So, just put it in. So, is that better?
Yes.
Anyway, we lived there for 6 months, and Al was watching for houses, and he found a house on Eagle Lake, right where Thatcher Road comes into North Shore Drive. And so we lived in that house. It was a 2-bedroom house. And when I moved, I moved in about a week before Kathy was born. And the house the floors needed to be refinished. And we got one of those floor sanders. You couldn't stand up and do it. You had to get down on the thing and sand the floors. It was kind of that wide pine floors. And I, on my hands and knees, sanded that whole floor. in a 2-bedroom house, and then covered it with painting that polyurethane or whatever it was, 3 days before Kathy was born. So anyway, and she was very healthy and fine for much years. As we moved in, we painted all the walls and the ceilings and the woodwork, and we made it livable. And then when about 2 years later, 2 or 3 years later, in 1963, we had Tommy, and he came home to this little house. Oh, that's better. He came home to the little 2-bedroom house, and that just didn't work out. There was 1 bedroom for our 2 girls, and the other bedroom for Tom and me. So we moved to a house further down on Eagle Lake, which Al Karras found us. Is this okay? You hear?
Yes.
Okay. And that house was much bigger. It was on Lakeshore Drive on the dead end. We became very involved in the community after we moved here. We were in the Chamber of Commerce, church, the Methodist Church, the Women's Society of the Methodist Church. We were in sport, went to all the sports events. In those days, the only sports events was football, basketball, and maybe a little track. So, but everybody, that was activity that was going on here. We had a parent-teacher organization at Eagle Lake, and I and another friend from Elkhart started the La Leche League, which is helping women with breastfeeding. And we started a couples club at church. We met monthly, and we played a lot of games and had a lot of fun. It was just a great thing. We also started a youth group, which met every Sunday evening. And the youth group we'd have worship. We'd have a worship thing, and the kids would take turns being the leader, and they'd have to look up their topic and teach the people. And then we'd have games and dessert, and they really liked the games. And we played volleyball if we could, but they also planned. The church had student pastors. We never had a permanent pastor. Well, these student pastors at Christmas and Easter, the main holidays, they didn't want to stay here. They wanted to go home to their families. So I thought we should have Christmas Eve services, and we should have Easter sunrise services. So who would do it but the youth? And so they had to write the research and write the programs and write whatever they were going to talk about. They had to present the programs. And then for breakfast, we'd go downstairs and have boiled eggs and coffee cake and so forth. And the kids had to serve it, and then they had to clean it up afterwards. So they were really a bunch of kids. Let's see. And they got to be good friends of mine. And one time, they came out to my house. I lived on Eagle Lake then, and they said they wanted me to take them to the lake for the second from the last day of school. All the kids skipped school, and so they wanted me to take them up to the Eagle Lake. I went to Lake Michigan for their skip day. So I said, sure, you come out, you mow my lawn, you clean my house, you dust, you do everything. Then I'll be glad to take you. And lo and behold, the day before that all happened, I saw a lawnmower going by with Bob Johnson driving it, and then another one came by with Chris Dresch driving it, and a bunch of girls came in with dust rags and so forth, and they cleaned my house better than I do probably, and they mowed my lawn. So I took them to the lake the next day, and I had a station wagon. You know how those old, not a van, a station wagon, and we had my 4 kids, and probably about 8 or 9 of those kids, there were 13 of us in the car. We went up to Lake Michigan, and they had a good day. And can you imagine now the liability and why did their parents let them go with me? We started the youth group. Decided that we should. One of the kids, Connie Went, decided that we should clean up the roadsides. There never was this roadside pickup. I'd never heard of it before. And anyway, I thought, yeah, let's plan. So we got bags, and we spent one day, all the kids, and then we gathered more people, and we cleaned up the roadside. And I think there was a picture in the paper of a pile of trash along the highway, about now where the bank is. And it was probably a 2 or 3 story, a story high of trash piled up, a huge pile of trash. And so that started every year there'd be a road pickup. So these kids on their own started road pickups around here.
And the newspaper published a big picture saying, "Is any of this yours?"
Each Christmas, Tom took the group caroling, while I made hot chocolate to warm them up afterwards in front of the fireplaces. And it started out just the youth, and then some of their parents started coming, and more people coming, and it got to be about 50 people getting in cars and going over caroling all the time. And they'd come back to my house, and this is when they did all the time, but as it got bigger, we were living in the house on Section Street, and it had 2 fireplaces, and they would come back, and I'd have sloppy joes and hot chocolate, and they would sit around the fireplace and sing, and the little kids, we had all ages, and the little kids would go up the stairs, up the front stairs, run down the hallway, go down the back stairs, and go around. And Doug Gibson was about 2 years old at the time, and he would go up to the top of up the curved stairway in the big house, and he would slide down on tummy-wise, head first, slide down the stairs, and then he'd run up and slide down again. He got a rug burn on his stomach from but those kids had a good time. I put luminaries on the lights to the house in the big town, and it looked so nice for them driving in and coming back to it. And I started doing, the kids were so good, the youth in our group were so good, and they did so much. And so I decided that when they graduated, they deserved to be honored a little bit. So I had a breakfast for the seniors, and their parents would come, and we'd have a really good breakfast, the great eggs and the sour cream coffee cakes and so forth. And then I'd talk about each one of them. And it's amazing what young people were then and are now, I suppose. But anyway, we honored those students, and I think that's a really good thing to do. A friend of ours went to square dancing school, and he had to have people that's called the square dance. So we started a square dance club in Edwardsburg called the Promenade Pals. And we had a great time doing it. We weren't very good at it, and we made a lot of mistakes, and we laughed a lot. And we'd go to conventions where there were other square dancers, and we always goofed up. In square dancing, you have to keep moving, and if you make a mistake, it does the whole couple in. I mean, the whole square gets done. And you'd make dresses to, so we'd all have matching dresses, and we chose some red and white fabric, and we had the fabrics that this red and white, so the girls were wearing the red and white dresses and very full skirted, and the guys were wearing red dresses, and we went to a convention somewhere, and one of the other leaders says, "Those damn red dresses." Our group was always messing up. Tom organized a basketball team for the church, and they went to the tournament, men's basketball tournaments that the churches would have, and there would be either in Albion or Grand Rapids or something. And Tom and Lau Montgomery were both injured, knees or ankles or something. And so I took them to the emergency room there, and they were wearing their basketball shorts and their, the socks and everything. And they sat on, there was no room in the emergency room, none of seats, so they sat on the floor. And they were so goofy that when the doctor got them in the room and he heard them talking, he looked at Tommy and said, "Are you sure you're a doctor?" I remember we used to have clinics here, polio clinics, and we had a swine flu clinic. I guess I was in charge of the whole county swine flu thing, and I must have been successful because I don't think we had any cases of swine flu. I don't even know if there was such a thing as swine flu, but we all got shots. And I remember it was good that when the polio vaccine used to be injections, and then it became to be pills, and so it's nice to give them a sugar cube rather than a shot, especially the little ones. I was a nurse, and I've always kind of identified myself as being a nurse. But married women usually didn't work, so I stayed home, and I'd work on Tom's office on Saturdays, or if his nurse was gone, or when the nurse went on vacation or something. And but when Mark was in kindergarten, I read in the Argus that Cass County Health Department was going to start a family planning clinic, and they needed a nurse. And I just couldn't resist. So I went to the health department and told Golden Garden that I would like to volunteer. "Oh no," he said, "I couldn't volunteer. It was going to be a paid job." And he didn't want me to come do it, and I had to set up the whole thing. There were 2 little offices in the annex to the courthouse. You know, there's little new buildings there and they have offices. And they used them as offices in the daytime. And at nighttime, we had one examining table in one of the rooms. And the other room was where the people would change, the women would change their clothes. So they would come in, go in the change clothes room, get in a yellow paper gown and sit in the hallway and wait for the doctor. And we had Dr. Warren, who was very fast. And so they'd be lined up and he'd go and examine one patient and they'd walk out with the doctor and we'd shoo another woman into the room and so forth. And worked out very well because in those days, birth control pills had just first come out and people were just flocking in to go to them. And I didn't think any Catholic people would do it because they were, at the time, Catholics I didn't think they believed in birth control, but many of our patients were Catholic and the nurses were Catholic and they were sending us patients, so it didn't matter. Birth control was something badly needed and we were successful right away. And I had somebody working for me at the desk called Joanne Mackling. And she was so organized and she kept us working and well, everybody knew that Joanne was in charge and Joanne said something, you better be doing it. And we would travel back and forth and Joanne and I, we started a clinic in Dwajak too and we'd be coming home at nighttime, late at night, coming home and we thought, what if we had an accident? And the police came and they see condoms and vegetable speculums and all over the ground. They had that accident. They'd wonder about us for sure. After the clinic, we'd, you know, you had all these vaginal speculums. Well, that was for disposables, I guess. Anyway, we would wash them. And there was a break room that all the nurses in the daytime used as their lunch breaks and their dinner and so forth. And little did they know that at the nighttime there'd be vaginal speculums in that sink getting washed, and we never told them. We got, there weren't very many doctors and in the county, Dr. Warren and Tom and not too many others. And we'd have to get them or anybody we could find. And so Tom managed to get some interns from Memorial Hospital to come. And it was hard to get them and hard to do and everything. So there was a program for I started a new program to train nurses to be nurse practitioners. And Owen Garden wouldn't have it any other way. I was to go. And I said, okay, I'll go in a year because my kids were still in high school and Tommy would be graduated by then and I didn't want to go away. But there was no way. Owen sent me that first time to Milwaukee. So I went to Milwaukee for 16 weeks and I drove up and many weekends I'd drive home again. But it was the hardest program I've ever had for those 4 months. And anyway, I went to nurse practitioner school and was a nurse practitioner for all the clinics after in Cass County. And then I also went to Berrien County. And about 1990, Van Buren County and Cass County broke off from the Berrien County, and they had their own clinic. And I had been working in all the clinics, so I applied for a job in Berrien County, in Cass County too. And the guy said that, well, anyway, we talked about salary. I don't remember what the numbers were, but anyway, he would only pay me $1 more as a nurse practitioner work than as a nurse practitioner, but I only got about the same thing. And he was paying the doctors about $100 an hour. So I said, well, I can't work for that. He said, I guess we don't have anything to talk about then. So I talked the same thing to Berrien County, and they said, well, I told them the average nurse practitioner salary was like $25, and he said, he went to talk about it with his administrators, and he came back and he said, Marge, we can't give you $25 an hour. He said, you said the average nurse practitioner makes $25 an hour. We don't think you're average. We're going to pay you $26 an hour. So, and Berrien County always did appreciate me, and I got awards and everything. And I love the people there, and we all got along really well. I get a lot of questions about our Barber Street house. And and hardly anybody in the probably 20, 30 years before we moved to Edwardsburg, or before we moved into that house, had seen the inside of that house. So everybody was really interested. And so, well, it was a long story, but the Hams where McLean's live now, were kind of good friends of ours, and they kind of watched over us. And Mrs. Ham somehow managed for Tom to buy
My turn.
Oh, sure. Oh, so anyway, we bought the house, and what was I going to say? Anyway, so nobody knew that we'd had it at that time. In our bridge club, there were 12 people in it, including the superintendent of the schools for one evening. And we said, they came to our house for bridge, and we said, no, we're not going to play here. We're going to take you someplace else. So we drove in there. We drove through the driveway, and it was all branches and bushes all over, and you could hardly get it. You scraped your car as you went through there. So they were quite impressed to go in that house. And as we were sitting, all the people around, at the time I had no idea. You'd never get me to leave my Eagle Lake house. But it was so delightful, and we had lights on the wall, chandeliers, and we could turn them down low, and it just was so beautiful there that we decided, well, maybe we could live here. And so we decided that we would stay there. And I had the Women's Society, and I don't know what they call it. Anyway, the group of women in our church came for lunch one day, and one of the women said, well, she'd be damned if any man could ever get her to live in that house. And, I think by the time we got all fixed up, she might have changed her mind. But the grade school kids all thought that the house was haunted, and so one year, Mary Montgomery was a kindergarten teacher, and Janie Montgomery Huntsberger was a first grade. I don't know. Anyway, they thought they'd bring their kids to our house to go through it. There was no furniture in it at that time, and it was pretty, cobwebs hanging and so forth. And we said sure. So, but all the first and second kindergartners and first graders were going to come. And they came through, and they came we'd come in and we'd bring in the whole class, and I'd take them through the house, and they raved about it so much that it ended up, all 6 grades came, and we had to do it 2 days. And I would take them in one room, and there was one of the teacher's husband dressed up like a vampire, and he would flit around behind me, and he'd make hands and do all kinds of things, and the kids would say, Mrs. Ray, he's back there. And I'd say, no, there's no ghost here. And no, he's right there, and he would do something, and I'd say, no, and then I'd lead him in another room, and he'd follow us. And anyway, the kids had a great time, and I remember Tom Seckerman, who was a big guy, was lying on the bed in the top of the stairs, and they'd come up the stairs, and as they came up, he'd put his hands out and go up and sit up like a zombie, and Janie was at the piano playing like a hunchback from Notre Dame, and she'd play the piano and then reach out and touch him, and the kids were scared to death. But anyway, most of them had a real good time. Even Mr. Meddy came through, and people will still. I'll go someplace and I'll talk to them. And say, oh yeah, I've been in your house. I came through. A lot of them did come on Halloween, and let's see about that. Joanne, one year we had this museum was not nearly as big as it was now. It was going to have a yard sale kind of thing to raise money. And I asked Joanne McLean if anybody would want to come see our house. And oh my goodness, she thought yes. And so I said, we'll charge $1 a person. And maybe we'll have 25, 30 people come. And so when I got there Saturday morning, there was Dorothy Skronsky had a card table set up on the outside and a little placard saying $5 for your tour. And I thought, well, if we're lucky if we have 5 or 10 people coming, but at least we'll make money. And we ended up making over $800. Everybody wanted to see the inside of that house. Even the Indianapolis Hostage Society, which is a real big organization, probably one of the biggest ones in the United States, had a bus tour to Michigan, and I was friends with one of the people down there, and she volunteered my house and my yard to come on the hostage tour. And I had a lot of different kinds of hostas, and I had labels and everything. So the bus pulls out, and they all get out, and they came, And they just marveled over our yard, and because we had pretty good soil over there, and they don't have as big a yards in Indianapolis, and so they were really impressed with it. So it told me that Edwardsburg's pretty good. Oh, they went to Fernwood too, but anyway, they really liked Edwardsburg. Oh, in our house in town, we had a lot of wedding receptions. Our kids all got married there, and a lot of people would come there. Mary Notice had their 50th wedding anniversary celebration there, and one of our kids got married there. I would have Christmas parties, luncheons for the Berrien County staff and the Cass County staff, and even all people at town's office, and graduation parties and so forth. In 1980, I was on the school board, and I thought that we should do something for the teachers at Christmas, not anything big, but just acknowledge that there was Christmas. So I said they could come to my house and we would have cookies for them. And so we had the cookies, we had the house already, and I was waiting for somebody to come, and my dog was there, and somebody pulled up, and I thought it was a guy, Tommy was there, and Tom thought it was one of his friends. So when, big tall kid came in, and Tom thought it was one of his kids, and he opened the door and said the dog to sick him. Well, it turned out to be Pat Featherstone, and he was bringing the cookies for the kids. I was sicking my dog on him. And we had good memories of all the little ghosts and goblins that would come every year. One little boy, when he came in, they'd come trick-or-treating, and I wouldn't have him just out the door. I had the house all dark, and the candlelight was the only light that was there. And one little boy just wanted to come in, wanted to go up the stairs so bad. And I said, no, we're not doing that now. Yeah, he wanted to go up the stairs. So finally, I heard a voice from upstairs say, let him come, Mom. And I think it was Mark. And so I let the little boy go up the stairs, and it's a curved staircase. So he got up, and he got almost three. The reason he wanted to go up so bad was his dad bet him $5 that he wouldn't go up the stairs. And so we let him go up, and he was about 3/4 of the way up. And down came a bat, one of those big rubber bats, came down like that. The little boy saw the bat. It came just a couple feet from him, and he turned around and ran out the door and ran back to his dad's car, and his trick-or-treat bag was dragging in the ground, and he lost all his candy. But anyway, I hope his dad gave him the $5 to come in that house. But kids were really scared of that house because everybody told them how bad it was. Really good memories are that we lived in Edwardsburg, and Vera Slechtovo was the German teacher, and she took a busload of senior citizens every other year to Europe. So we were lucky enough to go 6 times to Europe. I think that probably some of the differences between now and back then was that we didn't have cell phones and we didn't have internet. And you wonder how much different it would be and how much fun people would have had together if they had cell phones and they had their internet to stay at home with. I have one little story that Tom didn't tell about him suturing a little girl. At nighttime, he'd get a lot of calls, and we'd go in. And when it was a suture, I would often go in with him. And so he got the little girl in, and in order to suture anybody, little ones, he'd have to not tie them down, but he had a draw sheet that he folded up, and he would put them under one arm and then under their back and then the other arm, so they couldn't move at all. And so he sutured away, and it didn't take very long, but he had to numb it up and so forth and so on. And she was so angry with him, and she was shouting and yelling and calling him names, and she knew more Navy words than I did. And she just was so angry with him and so mad, and just told him where his mother came from and everything. And so he untied her, and he got them all down, and that didn't take long, and she walked out of the thing, and she was walking out, "Goodbye, Dr. Ray," and she just she wasn't upset, but she let him know what she thought of saying. That was pretty typical going out in there. And I guess that's probably about enough. We've talked a lot, but I want to tell about, before I went to nurse practitioner school, I was going to leave my family for 4 months, and so I was scrubbing away on that the floor in that house. It was like 40-year-old linoleum, and I was scrubbing away at the linoleum, and the dog was barking, and I thought, oh no, and I looked out, and there's a man coming from the backyard, up from the back, and I thought, oh, that's a custodian, and the dog is not, and he's coming to bawl me out about having my dog out there. So I motioned for him to come in, and he came in, and he was just really hot and sweating, and he said that his car had got stuck in a snowbank, and would I take him to South Bend? And I said, no, I don't have a car, my car's being serviced today, which it was, and I don't have a car, so I can't do that. Well, would I call someone? And he kept trying to get me to, he wanted me to get him a taxi, and I had a big argument with him about whether I'd call him a taxi or not. I said, taxi's too expensive, you can't drive a taxi. So I said, don't you have anybody? Well, no. And I said, how about your wife? Oh yeah. So he called his wife to come, and the dog just kept growling at him. The dog stayed between me and him, and he's very evil sounding. And I said, I don't know what's wrong with this dog. She won't hurt you. She's never hurt anybody. She's never bitten anybody. Don't worry about it. But she kept growling, and I said, oh, I'm going to have to put you in another room. So I got him into our big, our library room, and they had a television in there. So I settled him down, and all you could watch in those days were soap operas. So I settled him down the soap opera, and I said, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to close these doors. Big 12-foot doors, and close them. I said, because I don't know what the dog won't, I'm worried about the dog. So the dog sat by those, about 2 feet from those doors on her haunches going, and so I went about with my mopping, and I was on the phone, and all of a sudden I saw Kenny Bowers come walking up our driveway with a rifle. Then he came from the yard, going into our backyard, and I looked out in the backyard, and there were many policemen all over our backyard. And so I thought, I bet I know who they're looking for. So I motioned them on in, and they said, is somebody here? I said, yeah. And then the man, yeah. Is he black? Yeah. And they said, does he have a gun? And I said, I don't know. And I grabbed the dog and went outside, and they went in and they found him sitting in the thing, and they brought him out, and I looked at him, he looked at me, and I felt so guilty about letting them capture my guests in my house, and he was feeling guilty about having deceived me. But anyway, they took him away, and he had robbed a house on Garver Lake and was trying to rob a house, and the woman came home, so he drove into Edwardsburg and did get stuck in a snowbank, and had tried to get Mrs. Keller to take him to South Bend. She had a little Volkswagen, and he got in her car and made her drive, and she was going to drive into the Methodist church and bang her car into there, but she didn't want her little Volkswagen hurt, so she went down to Section Street and stopped the car in the middle of the road and got out and started screaming, and that's when the guy jumped out, and he went back through the backwoods and came in from the back, and this nice lady said, come on in. So anyway, I captured a robber. And I think that's enough, so I don't know how long the time is, but I got many more memories. But you got any questions?
If I remind you of something, just cut in.
I made house calls. Doctors these days don't make house calls, but I made a lot of them. People get sick suddenly in the nighttime when they need help. Oh, yes.
Or they don't have transportation, or they just take advantage of me. I was just kind of a soft touch. But anyway, I had some real interesting experiences on house calls, and I learned a lot about the families that I was taking care of, and I thought that's important that you know what else. So one thing, I got called in the early evening. There was a party going on down the lake, and they said one of these boy swimmers, a teenager or 20-year-old, had gotten a fish stuck in his throat. He couldn't get it out, he was choking. And so I jumped in the car and drove down there, and I looked the situation over, and here's this guy choking and everything, and I told them, there were a whole bunch of strong boys there, I told them to put his knees down in the chair and drape him over the back of the chair so that I can work from below and gravity will take care of the fish. Well, I was getting ready to treat it, and all of a sudden, there's a fish on the floor. They had done the Heimlich maneuver. I did not think about calling it the Ray maneuver. But when his back of his stomach went over that back of the chair, it created that pressure and it blew the fish out. So that was interesting.
How much did you charge?
I was also kind of a sports, I wasn't the team physician, but when I'd go to games, they would ask me to come out on the floor or on the field and look at somebody. Usually in football, it was their knee, if they had a bad knee. And basketball was a laceration or a bruise or something. So this one night, I did see a laceration of a cheek in a boy in the first half. And I took him over to the office at halftime, sewed the lesion up, and he went back and played the second half. Another time, I had to put my son's shoulder, my son Tom, shoulder back in place, and he didn't go back to the second half. In fact, I think that was probably the end of his basketball career.
They were laying on the floor and Tom's foot was in his armpit and it pulling on his arm. And
Pop it right
you could all
back
see
in.
it pop back in.
So, Gene Montgomery and I worked together. I was the voice of the Eddies. Gene was the timekeeper. That timekeeper is a real stressful job. All I do is make a fool of myself by calling some Polish guy by some name that he didn't even recognize because I couldn't pronounce it. So I did that for about 4 or 5 years, and they didn't give us any money for it, but they gave us nice jackets that we could wear in the fall to keep warm, and they gave us pads to sit on when we were doing our job. So I still got them. I never get rid of anything. Dr. Knox called me one day and said, I'm medical examiner for Cass County, and I need help. Would you be a medical examiner also? I said, yeah, I will. And that was interesting. We did it for 4 or 5 years. And a couple of the things that I remember real well, there was a big fire in all the businesses over had a whole bunch
Industrial
of
park.
Industrial park, yeah, thank you. And so I went over there to see what happened after the fire, and I was being turned around, and the guy was walking with me, showed me 2 little mounds about this high. He said, those are 2 people that didn't make it. This one patient, when I first started practice, something I forgot to talk about earlier. When I first started practice, when Marje and I were working in General Hospital in Indianapolis, we would wash rubber gloves and hang them up on a rack to dry. That's what they got to be sterile. Well, when we came up here, that was too time consuming. I mean, they didn't pay her very much. I don't think they paid her anything, maybe. So I did surgery for at least 2 years barehanded, no gloves, and never had a bit of trouble with infection. I looked it up in the paper in 1965 is when they started having disposable gloves, so that was 3 or 4 years after I came here. I always made time for playing basketball 3 times a week. There were all kinds of opportunities. I'm not sure they still have them all, but the school opened up, Cassopolis School was open part of the time. There were just innumerable. We had a tournament, we had a league here in town for a while. And I was looking at all the things that maybe Edwardsburg had and didn't have. And I thought, they don't have a swimming pool. So I thought, now, where would you put a swimming pool? And I thought, I think that woods there beside that big white house would be a good place to put the swimming pool. So that's why I got interested in buying that house. And we were very good friends of the Hams. The Ham the wrecker lived downtown, down the street here. And he and Anna, his wife, were so kind and fully introduced me to them. And if I go in there at dinner time, for some reason, they'd say, sit down and have a meal. It was just great. Well, I was over visiting them one day, and Mrs. Ham said, you know, I think that house, maybe I mentioned that I was thinking about the woods for the swimming pool. She said, I think that house is for sale right now. She said, they're good friends of ours, and the brother had died, the woman who was left couldn't take care of the house. So she said, go over and talk to her. She said, there's some other couple that's really anxious to buy the house, but she doesn't like them. So I went over and talked to her, and I probably asked her, is there anything I should expect? Any troubles with the house? She said, no, except the faucet upstairs in the bathroom leaks. I said, let me have a look at it. And so we went up there and I fixed the leak in her faucet. And after that, she said, I think you can buy my house. Isn't that nice? And we were a little apart, I think maybe $500 apart. And as I was going out, I saw this parlor grand. It was in the front room. I said, if you throw that piano into the mix, I'll give you what you want. She said, fine. Marge said, she was probably trying to figure out how to get rid of it. She got rid of it. Anyway, it's still in my basement, and I played it for years. I've got a keyboard now. I don't play it so much, but anyway, then I talked to the school, and they said, we can't afford a swimming pool. So I had a house, and I think Marge was going to tell about how she was really not very happy with the house until that one night we played bridge there, and it was just so pleasant that she was sold. Some of the things that happened, some of the things that happened to me that didn't have anything to do with Edwardsburg particularly, but Cass County. When I moved in here in 1960, they asked me to be on the board of a mental health foundation, a mental health program. The state had just passed a law giving money to local residences to take care of mentally ill people. And I said yes. So I'm still on it about 60 years later. But this is the lady that used all my time up. And I grabbed her.
Go ahead.
Okay. Anyway, so I went on this mental health board. We ate at the Eagle Park Inn once a month. It was a nice meal. The office for that group was in our neighbor's garage, and the place where they took care of people was in in Cassopolis.
Dr. Warren.
Dr. Warren's office, yeah. So now we have 2 buildings, all kinds of things, so it's really improved. But I think I was elected president of the thing, and by that job I was given a place on the transit authority, which was something also new. In about 65, I don't know whether you all know it, but you can order a bus to take you any place in the county, anytime you want to. And very, very reasonable. They have 3 or 4 buses up there.
It is time.
You want me to take it away from you,
Last
Tom?
one.
Let's see.
One more.
We're enjoying it, Marge.
Well, I I joined the group called the Rebel Leaders in about 1960, or
Yeah.
2002. And I was in it for 14 years. And we sang in Gulf Shores, Alabama. We sang all over southern Michigan. And 14 years, we really had a nice deal. But the guy had heart trouble and he just couldn't breathe anymore, so. Oh, Barnes Hall Theater. We were judging a contest one night in the auditorium, and they started talking about somebody wanted to sell the barns up on Hospital Street for their lumber cost. And Johnny Rodebush said, why don't we make this into a theater? And that's what it ended up. And it was just people attracted from all over the Cassopolis area mainly. But they grew it together, and we were there until 2004 when it burned. So then we started looking for another residence, and we're now in the Methodist Church in Cassopolis. Adamsville. See, I was just checking. Okay, I think that's, I can.
All right.
So,
I sold his practice in 1985 to Elkhart General. I forgot to tell you this. And he sold it, but he still was here for another 5 years before another doctor came in, right? And then you went to Bristol, where he worked with a physical therapist and 2 female doctors, as I remember you telling me.
yeah.
And where you retired
Only problem was
over.
I had a contract for 5 years, and at the end of the 5 years, the doctor must have purchased the practice from Elkhart. He said, I'm closing the office. I said, okay, what are you gonna do with me? He said, it's up to you. Well, my contract said if for any reason the office wasn't available, they had to find a place for me. So they asked me if I wanted to go to Bristol, and I said yes, and I was there for close to 10 years.
And then he retired, sort of. This has been great. Well, I had to give you the summary because I know that they had so many stories and they just produced them and produced them and produced them. This has been really great, you guys. Does anybody have any questions? Go ahead, Chris.
Well, all the years that you were treating all the little kids around town, how many times did they give you something? Like chicken pox or the flu or, you know, did you get sick from treating some of the little people?
No.
Wow.
I don't think he ever missed a day of work, and
I'd have colds sometimes, but I would blow my nose real well and then go in and examine the patient and then come out and blow it again. So most of the time they didn't get it.
Didn't catch their cooties, huh?
What year did you become a nurse practitioner?
1981.
Okay, I mean, we hear so much of it now, but not.
Yeah, there were almost no nurse practitioners in the whole country, and I was one of them. And they had nobody to do these newly formed family planning clinics, and the nurse practitioners were 20 times better than the doctors. The patients wanted a woman mostly, and the doctors didn't talk to them and didn't ask them anything. They just, do a quick exam. And we were so popular, and everybody loved us. So it really was a good solution. It's a great place.
Anybody else, Barbara?
Ed?
Tom, how many times did you injure your fingers playing basketball?
That was it. But it hasn't bothered me a bit.
You want to say something?
We've got the 2 fingers that were broke,
Judy has a question.
No, it's not a question. I just would like to tell everybody, when Tom first came to town, he delivered babies. And in our little powder room over here, we have a nice collage of every single baby he delivered and all their names and their dates. We found them on a cardboard that evidently he must have put up when he would deliver a baby. And so we took it apart and I took it down to Hobby Lobby and we made a nice collage of all the babies that Dr. Tom delivered.
I think we also have a scale that he
Yes,
had
we
in
have
his
a scale
office.
too.
Yep.
in our bathroom here. I think we also have a scales from
I'll
Tom's
turn the light
office.
on. so-
There were many little naked babies laid on that scale, and probably some of them are, grown up and walking around Edwardsburg now.
You know, Marge, you brought back a memory about you're talking about the hot chocolate and
Oh, yeah.
marshmallows for Christmas caroling. And one time after we left her house, there was a group of cars, we went out to, Lakeview Drive out of Garber Lake. And we got stopped by the cops because too many cars were coming out of that road. So that was the reason we got stopped and got delayed coming to your house. So, and one other time we did a scavenger hunt. It was Neil Miller and Linda and Dennis and I in the car doing our scavenger hunt. And we were across from what then was the Tasty Freeze here in town, or Spicy's today. And we were at the railroad tracks there because it was still wasn't open. That was still open. You could still go down Hamilton Street to 62. And we got stopped by the cops because they wanted to know what we were looking for or why we were there searching. So we've been stopped a couple times. I guess I've been in too many cahoots with you guys.
This has been terrific. We have cookies and lemonade, I believe, or cider or something, that Eleanor made. And so it's in the other room, so there's plenty of time to, so I think somebody else wants to ask one more question.
I have a question. I know Tom from the Barn Swallow Theater. Were you ever an actor there too?
Oh my goodness, yes.
I didn't know that.
They always seem to have a part open at the end of auditions, and it was one that fit me really well.
They weren't allowed to have a play unless they did.
I had really done.
But it was hard to get actors, men, to be in the plays, and so Tom did take a lot of parts. And if you had to practice, for Barnswap, to put on a thing, you had to practice about 6 weeks ahead of time, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and you stayed often from 7 to after 9 or 10, so very few people could dedicate that much time to it.
I had to give my wife thank you for making it possible for me to do all these things, basketball, theater, and she was always taking care of the home.
Oh, nice. Social hour, and Judy Montgomery wanted me to remind you that there's tickets for the 2:30 cemetery tour. So if you want to buy one, they're $5, and she'll have them right up here.
And I think Tom's
Thank
gonna
you.
be one of the characters, right? One of the people
Yeah.
buried in the cemetery.
Tom is one of the characters.
That's right.
For the cemetery tour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I got